Milton is forecast to strike the west coast of Florida as a dangerous major hurricane. Good Saturday evening. I'm Mike Nasa with the latest on the tropics. Taking a look at the Atlantic Basin, we are watching Tropical Storm Milton here in the western Gulf of Mexico slowly organizing, forecast unfortunately to strengthen into a hurricane, and then a major hurricane, and then just glide right into the state of Florida by midweek. That's going to be the focus of much of our coverage the next few days. We still have Hurricane Kirk up here, very large and powerful, but weakening and heading into the northern Atlantic waters. And then we have Hurricane Leslie down here, looking a little bit better organized, but it doesn't have much time before that too will weaken and head out to sea. But the focus will be mainly on Milton over the next couple of days. Here's the latest as of 10 p.m. Central Time, 11 p.m. Eastern from the National Hurricane Center. Tropical Storm Milton was at 22.9 north, 95.1 west. And by the way, that puts it about a good 860 miles to the west-southwest of Tampa, Florida. And it is moving in that direction towards the north-northeast at 5 miles per hour, very slowly, winds of 45 miles per hour, so it's kind of getting us bearings. But through time, it should continue to the east, east-northeast, and then eventually the northeast into the west coast of Florida sometime on Wednesday, it looks like. The projected path cone is still rather large. It could be towards the Big Bend of Florida. It could be down near Marco Island. Right now, we're thinking probably somewhere in the middle, which would be the general vicinity of Tampa, St. Petersburg, Clearwater. But again, everybody along the west coast of Florida needs to be on alert. We do have a tropical storm watch in effect for the north coast of the Yucatan Peninsula because as Milton moves to the east-northeast, we could have tropical storm winds clip it, although right now it's very, very small. Tropical storm force winds only extend outward 35 miles from the center, so Milton is very tiny. Now, unfortunately, that means it can spin up or down very quickly, so it is susceptible to rapid changes in intensity. The forecast track models, these are the GFS ensembles as of 18Z on Saturday. They are showing a system moving east, then east-northeast, and through time, we should see that motion right into the coastline of Florida. And the other models here are not looking good with intensity. This is the HWRF model. By Tuesday, it has it as a very dangerous major hurricane north of the Yucatan, taking advantage of very warm water. And watch what happens here. It brings Milton right in to the area there north of Tampa Bay. If it took this track on the HWRF, a Category 3 or 4 hurricane, the right side, that storm surge, right into Tampa Bay, that would be a direct hit. That'd be horrible. Another hurricane model makes Milton a very impressive Category 4 or 5 hurricane in the center of the Gulf of Mexico, and even though it weakens as it heads towards land, it also slams it directly into the Florida coastline. And then this is the other hurricane model. This is a future radar, and notice it takes Milton as a Category 4 or 5 hurricane, and then even though it kind of goes through fluctuations, it slams right there into the Florida coast. Again, we would have storm surge all throughout the west coast of Florida in this scenario. You do not want to see this. It is bad news. Now, the wind shear should be low. It looks like the hurricane, well, it's not a hurricane yet, but when it becomes a hurricane, it's going to just glide here in the same direction as some of the troughiness and wind shear to the north, and that could allow intensification. Again, we think there'll be a couple of troughs that'll have an impact here, reaching down towards the Gulf Coast, just enough to kind of tug on Milton and gradually drag him to the east and then kind of faster. And that's going to be allowing him to move over those very warm waters and intensify. Now, rainfall is going to be a threat. Right now, we're thinking anywhere from 4 to 8 inches in most areas. And the problem is this is preceding Milton. We had that situation with Hurricane Helene where we had rainfall over the Appalachians and the southeastern U.S. before the hurricane, and the hurricane just made it worse. We could have a very wet couple of days over the Florida Peninsula prior to Milton, and there is obviously at least a slight flood risk. When we look at the radar right now, there is a lot of rainfall here, especially offshore, and this will all be kind of waterlogging areas of Florida. So again, expect wet weather prior to the storm. Now, for the Tampa Bay area, I know everybody thinks you get hit over and over again, but The Tampa Bay area has not been hit by a major hurricane, a direct hit, since 1921. It's been over a century. That was October of 1921, and we had a Category 3 hurricane make landfall near Tarpon Springs, Florida. Had been up to a Category 4, but it caused big, big problems. And that was the last major hurricane. The one before that was in the year 1848. So 1848, 1921, those were the two major hurricanes, Category 3 or higher, directly into the Tampa Bay area. So if the forecast holds, Milton might occur again. So if you're looking 1848, 1921, 2024, I don't know. But that is a possibility. The last hurricane to make a direct landfall in the Tampa Bay area was in 1946. It made landfall just south of St. Petersburg as a Category 1-2 hurricane, and it caused a lot of problems there. And again, that was also in the month of October. So October, the west coast of Florida is always at risk. And this is a visual that the National Weather Service put together of what we think that hurricane looked like in 1921. Obviously, we didn't have satellite back then, but this is probably what it looked like, and that caused a lot of problems in Tampa Bay. The key messages with Tropical Storm Milton as of 11 p.m. Eastern Time, if you're turning in for the night Saturday or just getting up Sunday morning, they'll pretty much be the same. Number one, Milton is forecast to quickly intensify as it moves east to northeast across the Gulf of Mexico and be at or near major hurricane strength when it reaches the west coast of Florida mid-week. Hurricane watches could be issued as early as late Sunday for portions of Florida. It does seem to be slower than we thought before, but still sometime on Wednesday. Number two, there is an increasing risk for life-threatening storm surge. We saw that in the Big Bend with Hurricane Helene. And wind impacts for portions of the west coast of Florida beginning late Tuesday or Wednesday. Residents in those areas should ensure they have their hurricane plan in place. Follow any advice given by local officials. Check back in for updates from the National Hurricane Center. And finally, areas of heavy rainfall will impact Florida well ahead of Milton, like I showed on that radar, with heavy rainfall more directly related to the system later on Tuesday through Wednesday night. This rainfall brings the risk of flash urban and aerial flooding, along with minor to moderate river flooding. Bad news all around. We still have Hurricane Kirk out there, a Category 3 hurricane, 115 miles an hour, way up there at 31.3 north, 49.3 west. Moving north at 20, it should accelerate and become extratropical north of the Azores. We won't have to deal with Kirk anymore. And then we still have Hurricane Leslie out there at 12.4 north, 36.9 west, winds of 80 miles per hour. It's a solid Category 1, but it should be weakening through time, moving northwest at 9. It should weaken and by midweek be out here between the areas of the islands and the Azores and weakening even further. Taking a look at the satellite imagery, there goes Kirk. Looks like an acceleration to the north there. And then behind it, here comes Hurricane Leslie. Looking a bit better, but obviously still flat on its western side. It just has never been able to fan out on that side because of the interaction with Kirk and a mediocre environment. Another wave looking like it's going to leave Africa. We'll watch to see if that one does anything. The next name, now that we have Milton, would be Nadine. So we'll see if we get Nadine sometime in the Atlantic. But Kirk headed out, Leslie headed out. The focus from here on out is going to be on Tropical Storm Milton. Again, this is a little bit of a surprise. Usually we get a longer term indication that something's going to be brewing. This one kind of popped up and then all of a sudden it was like, boom, here it is. And it looks like it's going to just kind of glide along with that trophiness into the west coast of Florida by midweek, faster and faster and faster, and strengthen very quickly. We could hope maybe it strengthens quickly and then starts to weaken, but regardless, it's going to be a powerful hurricane, and they don't need that, especially on the west coast of Florida. I'm Mike Nasel with the latest on Milton, and I'll continue to give you updates as the situation warrants.